Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Let's talk about unions, okay? So I asked Victor in preparation for this video, and I said, what's your general impression about unions? Like, what do you think? And he said, well, I don't know. I haven't really looked into it, but just my regular feeling about them is that they're kind of corrupt and don't serve a good purpose. Then I asked him this question. Do you think that because of your conservative upbringing and the conservative mantra about the free hand of the market and capitalism and all that, that it's not cool in the circles that you grew up in or conservative circles to be pro-union? And he said, I absolutely agree with that. That's true, right? And so basically, let's look at the function of the union in relation to the worker and in relation to the relationship between the government and corporations. Okay. So we did this episode. I'll put a link to it below, but it was about economic fascism, right? And you can see the whole episode if you want to below, but I'm just going to summarize it real fast. There's 4 different relationships that a government and corporations can have with each other. Okay. The first relationship is that the government just keeps their hands completely off of corporations, no regulation. Corporations do whatever they want. In that instance, corporations work for the shareholders and profit for the best interest of them and not in the best interest of the workers. So the workers end up getting mistreated. In the second scenario, the corporations take control of the government through agency capture. We have an episode on that. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to see more about that. But basically, each one in their field captures the regulatory industry, regulatory part of the government for them. So Pfizer will capture the CDC or the FDA. Big Ag, like Monticello or whatever, will capture the USDA and the FDA. Ran this all down in the video. If you want to see more, it's down below. But in that situation, the workers will be mistreated, right? And so in the third situation, you have a situation of fascism, which means government, in economic terms, it means government control, exerting control over corporations. But say you have an evil government. If you have an evil government controlling corporations, you're still not going to get good conditions for your workers. And the final scenario is a fascist scenario where you have a good government that's working in the best interest of all the people, in which case they're going to exert force, which they can do through economic fascism, on corporations to treat workers well. Now let's look at the effect of unions in all 4 of those situations. In the first situation, you have the government leaving the corporations completely alone, right? And if you were to get a union of workers to stand as an intermediary between you and the corporation, you would have a chance of getting better conditions for the workers through the threat of strike and stuff like that, cooperative bargaining and different things that are the advantages of unions. You also have a situation where a union becomes corrupt, and in that situation, you're in no worse situation than you were before with just the corporations in control. Same thing goes for the second scenario. Now we're in the scenario that we're in the United States of America, where the corporations have agency captured the government regulatory bodies. In that situation, if you had a union, you have the potential to have a better situation for workers, but you also have the potential that they're corrupt and that then you're no worse than you were before. In the third situation, the evil fascist government wouldn't allow unions, probably. So you wouldn't have access to unions. In the fourth scenario, which is the scenario we saw in National Socialist Germany, they banned unions. Because if a good government is the intermediary for the people in behalf of the corporations to make better conditions for the workers, there's no need for another intermediary in front of them that could become corrupt. There's no need for that. And so that's why they banned unions. They just weren't necessary anymore. Anyways, basically, we don't live in the fourth scenario. Chances are you don't live in the third scenario either. So you probably live in one of the first 2 scenarios. And if you think about it like that, maybe we've been mistaken about unions, right? Just the concept of unions. I'm not talking about particular unions. So when I called Victor again and asked him if he had any more thoughts on this after we had discussed it earlier in the week, he said, yeah, he did do some research and he looked up and he found situations where the union's demands for the wages and salaries of the people in their union were so high that they were above literally the budget of that entire county or district or whatever it was. That the demands were so that they couldn't pay. And like if your teachers union did that, like imagine you couldn't pay your teachers because the union had demanded the price to be so high. I mean, because I look at it like this. I'm naturally against unions because I come from capitalist upbringings, and now I realize some of those things that I thought were wrong. And if you had good unions and you're not in the fourth situation between the government and the corporations that I discussed earlier, unions could be a very good thing. So unions are something that I might have been wrong about, even though some of the unions are pretty corrupt. I knew this guy, and he was a conductor on a train. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was absurd. Like, he was making good money, more money than I'll ever make probably in a salary per year. And when he gets his retirement, he gets his entire pension. He gets full pay for the rest of his life. But then his wife gets something ridiculous, like 66% of his pay in addition. So they're making more money upon retirement than they were when he was working. And then if either of them dies, they inherit the other person's pension. So they always make 166% as long as one of them is still living, Now that's an extreme. That's insane, That's probably charging too much. That's insane. But like, I tried to, back when I was friends with the guy, I literally tried to get a railroad job loading cars at a railroad, but for a union. Because I figured if I could just get in on the ground level, I'm a pretty smart guy. I could work my way up. Didn't end up getting that job. I don't know why. They indicated I was going to, but didn't. So anyways, I just think it's interesting. Like, I'm a regular guy. I got a family. I'm anti-union. But in my entire life, I've had health insurance since November of 2023 for myself. Before that, I've had health insurance for like 2 months when Obama mandated it. And then I realized I couldn't afford it. So I just had to pay the fine every month, which you don't actually pay every month. You pay taken out of your tax return at the end. But like, it's a sad situation that hardworking people can't afford healthcare and stuff like that, And so, so Victor brought into this, like, but when you're discussing guilds, what about situations where good companies attract the best talent and this and that? And that is true, but that's the exception, not the rule. So that's the situation of SpaceX. All the best talent in all of those industries go to SpaceX because they're doing the most awesome things. I'm not really worried in this episode about astrophysicists and if they're getting paid fairly or if they're getting good benefits or pensions. I'm not really worried about that. What I'm talking about here is I'm talking about probably you watching, definitely me, right? I'm talking about people who work any variety of full-time jobs that they're doing for a career. I'm worried about the mechanic being paid correctly, having the right pensions. Warehouse workers, delivery truck drivers, carpenters. Now, carpenters, you get into the union business and all of a sudden they're getting paid very well, So I don't know. I think that if you really think about what I'm saying here, you might agree with me that there might be something more to unions if they were done correctly. And if they're done incorrectly, there's still not much disadvantage to unions unless you're in that fourth relationship of the government to the corporation. That's what I've got for you in a nutshell. And I think it's pretty interesting. It's not the sexiest topic ever, but I think it's very interesting. Every time I come across something, I'm like, wow, I might have been wrong about that. I immediately want to make an episode about it. Because I also want to hear what you have to say. So in the comments below, like, have you ever worked for a union? Did you get screwed over by a union? I'm interested in knowing. And that's what I got for you. So tomorrow I'm going to talk about the bombing of Dresden, and it's a ridiculous story. It's ridiculous just how much they'll just tell you, the ridiculous things they'll tell you. We'll talk about that tomorrow. See you then.